This video is best viewed on a stereoscopic 3D monitor or with YouTube's cardboard viewing option. For more 3D options, use the Flash Player by clicking the first link in the description. Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions and this VorpX guide for a very special, quite terrifying piece of art known as Layers of Fear. Before we proceed to configuring ourselves a digital traumatic experience, I do need to clarify that this guide is part of a series of VorpX tutorials that begins with the VorpX Universal Guide. I highly recommend watching that first, as it is, after all, the foundation of the series, and I may in this video refer briefly to things that are explored in the Universal Guide with more detail. There will be a link to the Universal Guide in the description of this video. If you happen to see the tag outdated between brackets in the title of this video, it means this game's guide has been updated with a new version that may contain a better setup process. If you see such a tag, look for a link to the new version of this guide at the top of the description of this video. Now, on with today's night terror. I mean game. Layers of Fear is one I would have never gotten to myself. It's quite a surprise, and I have to thank Eincro from Eincro Productions Co. and Red Pill Gaming Reviews for suggesting the title. After watching my Narcosis video, he said I'd probably like Layers of Fear. He was right, so thank you, Eincro. Now, while I did like the game, I do have to give an advance warning. Layers of Fear is definitely not the ideal game to run with VorpX. It has some limitations, but it meets my strict minimum to justify making a tutorial for it. To be more specific, we'll look at a working geometry 3D and some very good head tracking, but the game's own field of view setting stops at 60 degrees vertical, and I've still found no other means to boost it than to use VorpX's built-in feature, which will introduce some visual glitches that I will demonstrate later in the video. If you're looking for the perfect adaptation for VorpX, this definitely is not it. But if you're looking to play a really cool horror game in VR and are willing to accept a few limitations that I will demonstrate in this guide, then stick around, I'll show you how to get going. First off, before we do anything with VorpX, run the game normally at least once so it can complete its first run stuff without any issues. During this run, we can take the time to go in the game's settings and make a few changes. This game uses a launcher. You'll want to set the game to run in windowed mode from there. Once you've done that, click the launch button. After the game fires up, load or create a save game so that you can then go in the menu and then into gameplay settings. In the game's gameplay settings, jam that field of view slider all the way to the right. The game won't be giving us much of a maximum, but we'll take all it's got. Uncheck use head bob to make sure we don't feel like we're on a boat when we walk, and apply those changes. Next, in the graphics settings, if for some reason full screen is checked, uncheck it. We have two choices for resolution here. 1680 by 1050 for high-end systems, and 1440 by 900 for standard systems. We don't have any lower, but that's okay. The game should run fine on most rigs, at least on the standard resolution. Set VSync to off, and finally put the brightness on maximum. For the rest, it's up to you. At the high resolution, the anti-aliasing methods are fairly useless, so you can leave that off and save on performance. Do turn off chromatic aberration, as that really is not desirable for VR. That effect will make it look like your headset is fogged up or misaligned. Apply those settings. The game will likely tell you it needs to restart to apply these changes. That doesn't matter since that's what we're doing anyways. Close the game and head for the next step. This game has two issues on the VorpX front. First, it doesn't have a profile, and second, if you try to run Layers of Fear with VorpX running without first fixing a few things, the game will just go ahead and crash. The first order of business is excluding this game's launcher to make sure VorpX doesn't mistake it for the actual game. In the VorpX configuration tool, go in the Excluded Programs section. From there, click the Add button and navigate to the Layers of Fear folder. I'll display the usual path on the screen. If you have a custom Steam library, you likely know where your own file is. Add the file layersoffear.exe to the exceptions. Make sure not to add layersoffear_sub.exe. Now that we've added the launcher to the exceptions, it's not going to crash anymore if we have VorpX running. Next, we need a profile. The one I'm using for today's game is the Firewatch profile. Go in the Local Profiles section in the VorpX configuration tool and select the Firewatch profile. Next, click on the button to copy this entry. Give the copy a name and click OK. I like to keep the name of the original profile in mind so I know which one I used. Now, select your copied profile. It will have no exe files bound at this point. Click the Add button and go to the same location as the previous step. This time, we want to take the file layersoffearsub.exe. Once selected, you'll see the file assigned in the profile's details. Now, we've got VorpX ready to launch using this custom profile, so it's on to the manual VR setup. Launch your runtimes, VorpX, and Layers of Fear. Load your save game and click Continue or New Game. Word of warning, prepare for some very exquisite eye-fuckness here because we have to change a couple of options before things can look right. First, in main settings, change 3D reconstruction to geometry 3D. Z normal and Z adaptive cause this game to do very weird things while completely failing to yield any depth perception, so you can forget about those. Set separation strength to 3.5, which is like over 4 times the usual average, yet gives you a realistic world scale with this game, go figure. Next, set field of view enhancement, or FOV enhancement, at 1.15, and yes, that's a lot. I'll cover the problems this will cause in the known issues section of this guide. Next, under image settings, set crystal image to off. This game will eventually black out in your headset if you leave crystal image active in any way. At least, this is something I experienced with SteamVR, so feel free to try this with Oculus, but be warned the issue might exist as well. Set image zoom to 0.85. Believe it or not, this trick is to avoid having to use even more 3D FOV enhancement setting. Plus, it's a neat, quick way of increasing pixel density in the game's image. Under display settings, make sure that direct mode async render is on and that direct mode fluid sync is off. Finally, under head tracking settings, with the game's mouse sensitivity on default, set the head tracking sensitivity to 0.9 and make absolutely sure to turn off the positional tracking. Remember, I gave you a heads up about some exquisite eye-fuckness? Turning off positional tracking should make most of it go away now. You should be getting close to something clean. If head tracking roll is off, you can go ahead and turn that back on. By the way, if you've customized your mouse sensitivity setting, the head tracking sensitivity value I just gave you might not work. I recommend watching the manual VR section of the VorpX Universal Guide in order to learn how to adjust head tracking sensitivity using the shoulder-to-shoulder method. Last step is simply to select OK and save in the VorpX HUD and restart your game one more time. I've found that switching 3D reconstruction modes can cause the game to introduce some glitches, and I've gotten my best results starting the game up fresh directly with my correct VorpX settings. That's it! The next time you reload the game, you're good to go for a few hours of sheer joy and terror. I'll cover the known issues next. There isn't much you can do about these issues, but you'll probably want to know in advance what problems you can run into. As you may have heard earlier, I did say this adaptation was not ideal. And it won't take much time before you notice what's wrong. The field of view enhancement glitches are for real. Yes, we have a nearly VR spec field of view, but you see that rectangular section of the image in the middle that appears brighter than the rest? That's what the game thinks is in existence. Everything outside of that rectangle area is being forced by VorpX, and thus, any in-game mesh that is confined to that external area will simply not be loaded in the game. This means that you'll almost continuously notice things flicking in and out of existence in the corner of your eyes. Now, while the video makes this seem extreme, in the VR it's really not as noticeable. It's more of a distracting annoyance than anything else. The moments where it's most prominent occur in areas of the game where the walls are made up of individual tile meshes, causing a lot of noticeable flickering as each mesh pops in and out of existence. While the issue is hard to ignore, it is this game's only major issue. If you're ready to deal with this downside, given the geometry 3D is spot on, experiencing such a shocking horror game in VR is pretty cool, and it's not a very long title, so despite the issue, I've personally found it worth playing. Next in the known issues are those shadows, and the fact that the G3D shadow treatment can't seem to, well, treat any shadows. This isn't ideal, but aside for the odd room here and there with a few too many shadows to ignore, the problem has not been prominent. This is definitely nowhere near as distracting as the field of view issue. This game, being a manual VR setup, is subject to pitch mismatch, meaning that your in-game view may end up looking either straight up or straight down while your head is still at level. I've made use of my pitch-locked mouse to avoid any problems. A mechanical mouse that I modified to only respond on the yaw or X axis by blocking the Y or vertical axis sensor. Given this game's nowhere near as intense as, say, Shadow Warrior in terms of movement, with my pitch-locked mouse I found myself readjusting very, very rarely. The game really doesn't form a drift like shooters do with recoil effects. It's not direct VR level tracking, but it's fairly gentle with pitch mismatching. Remember not to use the crystal image feature, especially on SteamVR, as that seems to have halted all my attempts at playing the game at one point or another. With SteamVR, after about 20 minutes to an hour of play, one eye would go blank, then finally both eyes. While the game will appear to be running, the VR output in the headset will never restore itself. Crystal image on off should resolve this issue. This VR support is perfect, and all the things I just listed are not glitches, rather they're just the protagonist losing his frickin' mind. And possibly some of his vision. If anyone out there watching this video discover a way to expand the field of view properly, something that would land this game way better VR support, please share your trick in the comments. I'm open to updating this tutorial if such a discovery is made, and I'd obviously give full credit. Layers of Fear is a game I've only just recently gotten to know, and I had low expectations for getting VR working with it, mostly because even with the Firewatch profile, which in theory works properly with Unity Engine version 5 games, most of the Unity games I've tried each behave like special little snowflakes that sadly melt at the notion of VR. The minute I got Geometry 3D working with the game and found out the image ghosting was due to positional tracking, I knew I had finally found another Unity 5 game that might be less of a pain in the ass. Look, this is a pretty scary game as far as horror goes already, and playing anything with quality jump scares and creepy mindfucks in VR multiplies the original horror vibe meant for screens by a factor of like 6. Layers of Fear is an intense experience for VR, yet I found myself coming back for 2 tests an hour long each played from the beginning of the game. This thing messes with me. On one end, you have such good intrigue, and on the other, you obviously dread something extremely scary will happen. Sometimes they've made it so you might just let yourself go and forget about the second factor. Forget there's a dark presence with you and just start exploring. and then the game puts you right back in your place, reminding you to stay on edge. This is an excellent VR experience for the strong of heart and the horror junkies. Not because of its VR adaptation itself, that admittedly isn't optimal, but for the content in the game, which in my opinion supersedes the limitations by a long shot. In a nutshell, I could not give a damn that the edges of my field of view go out of existence. I'm under this game's trap. It lies and waits, catches you off guard, and terrifies the living crap out of you. And that's my jazz. Now, it's time to get to the game's vScore. The vScore is a rating system created to evaluate how well a game can be run in VorpX. The score is on a scale of 100 points and is based on 9 criteria, 8 that yield points and 1 that is a penalty value. The criteria are: first, the fixed points values where a game is given all or nothing for each. Acceptable 3D method. This is worth 30 points. If we can't have depth perception, we cannot have VR. Layers of Fear, to my good surprise, scores this category. Proper Geometry 3D. Geometry 3D brings the game to life by providing the only authentic stereoscopic 3D method, so 15 points for that. Going hand in hand with the first criteria, Layers of Fear will happily work with Geometry 3D, 15 points. Proper head tracking. Head tracking that goes all over the place is no fun, so this is worth 15 points. For a manual VR game, this head tracking is pretty good, 15 points. Second, the variable criteria, where the amount of points can be adjusted for each item. Sufficient field of view. A game really needs some means of forcing the field of view, and because of the various ways we can achieve this, some more effective and some less, this is worth up to 15 points. Look, we're literally twisting this game's arm to get it to go above its ridiculously low maximum field of view of 60 degrees. Although our solution takes the VR output above being just a small screen in the middle of your view, the glitches resulting from our settings prevent me from giving any points to Layers of Fear in this category. 0 points. Proper 3D hands and weapons. This has over time become a nice to have for third-party VR as it's quite rare, but gets a game up to 5 points for getting it right. This doesn't seem to apply to this game other than the fact that there aren't any issues with the scale of objects between foreground and background. Considering this is a plus, I'm giving it the 5 points. Proper shadows and graphics. Good shadows are hard to come by in VR, especially dynamic ones, so a game can gain up to 5 points on those. Sadly, I can't go too high here. The incorrect shadows and that odd glass shader issue may not be super prominent, but they're there, lurking, waiting to remind you this setup just isn't perfect. I gave the game 2 points here for effort. Also, I'm not gonna lie, some parts look downright perfect, which is really cool because the game looks great. Proper user interface and heads-up display. Being able to see your health, ammo count, and such is a plus, isn't it? Up to 5 points for how a game handles a heads-up display. The good thing here, the user interface usage is minimal in a game like this. The bad? Well, this heads-up display doesn't give a damn about your VorpX HUD scale setting, and thus menus and interfaces may be hard to see. Additionally, some menus are downright broken, like for example, the graphics settings, where while in VR you cannot see the apply button and have to guess with your arrow keys. I can only give 2 points on this category. The good thing here is playing this game does not depend much on any heads-up display, so it affects gameplay little to none. Direct VR bonus. Direct VR makes the process of setting up a game much easier and often delivers perfect head tracking. Based on how a game supports it, it can get up to 10 points in bonus. We definitely do not have Direct VR here. Wish we did it, probably solve the FOV enigma, but for now, it's all manual. 0 points for Direct VR. Next, the penalty. The penalty criteria exists to offset a game's score due to glitches or major issues. Up to 10 points can be withdrawn. I wanted to use this value for Layers of Fear, But really, I think I've slammed it where it respectfully deserved it, by giving no points for the field of view. Because of that, I won't be tossing the game any additional penalty, as the other less major issues are also factored in the scoring. Layers of Fear yields a vScore of 69. Oddly enough. This is a weak vScore at best. In fact, as you'll see this tutorial series expand, you'll likely never see me demonstrate games that go much lower than this score, as this is the acceptable minimum for running a game with VorpX. Were any other core features compromised, say head tracking or 3D, this game would not even have made the cut. That being said, this setup has allowed me to discover this creation of pure insanity. Given its short length, its playstyle, and the fact it's not a high-paced action game, it remains important for me to share these settings, as I know I'm not the only tryhard ready to accept a few limitations to enjoy a title this insane in VR. The point of good horror is to make yourself uneasy, on edge, tense, anxious, and most of all, scared. Layers of Fear with VorpX worked well enough to do just that, and while the setup doesn't yield the best results, at least it's an easy one, and by the time you have any chance of getting fed up over one or another issue, the game will be over as it's not a long experience. I hope this guide has been of use to you. If you want to see more guides, look at the top of this video's description for a link to both the universal guide video and the playlist for this series. We plan on continuing tutorial production over the summer, hopefully covering about a dozen titles total in the coming months. Until the next video, I shall see you next time. Thanks for watching.